Song of Solomon chapter 1 and verse number 15. This is Solomon speaking. Behold, thou art fair, my love. Behold, thou art fair. Thou hast dove's eyes. She replies, Behold, thou art fair, my beloved, yea, pleasant. Also our bed is green. The beams of our house are cedar, and our rafters of fir. Chapter 2, verse 1. I am the rose of Sharon, and the lily of the valleys. As the lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. As the apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the sons. I sat down under his shadow with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. Stay me with flagons, comfort me with apples, for I am sick of love. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand doth embrace me. I charge you, all ye daughters of Jerusalem, by the roes and by the hinds of the field, those are deer, that ye stir not up, nor wake my love, till he pleased. Jennifer and I were married July 3rd, 1991. Next Tuesday will be 27 years for us. They just changed Anna's due date. She's having a C-section. They've just changed her due date. She's having her baby next Tuesday on our anniversary. So you know that's going to be a great, great grandchild. We were married on July 3rd, 1991. I have told the story here. I love to tell the story of how we got married because I think it is so unique and it is so humorous. The church that we were a part of at that time growing up had church problems. And so because of that, we didn't have a traditional church wedding. Instead, we eloped, kind of. What I mean is that we chose to go to a town in Virginia where couples could get a marriage license and a preacher all at the same time. And so that's what we decided to do, except we told our parents that's what we were doing. And so we eloped, but we really didn't elope. It was a Wednesday morning. I picked her up at her house, me in my suit, her in her white dress. We drove a couple of hours away to Parisburg, Virginia. We found the courthouse. And it wasn't long before, for $32, I had our marriage license and the address to a local Southern Baptist church where there would be a minister who would marry us for a small fee. When we drove to the church was locked and no one was in sight. I found a phone booth that was on the other side of the street. This is before cell phone days. I called the courthouse back. And they directed me to a retired Methodist preacher who was just a block or two up the street, who was known to perform weddings for a nominal fee. And so we found the place. I knocked on the door. I explained to the gentleman why we were there, and we were welcomed in. The Methodist preacher had us stand in the living room while he went and found his book of wedding vows, picked one out, and proceeded to perform our wedding. His wife was there, and his aging mother-in-law was there as well. And since they did not want to miss the Oprah Winfrey show, which was playing right at the time, they kept the TV on in the background. We stood off to the side so we would not obstruct their view. That way, they could be the required witnesses to our wedding and still catch Oprah. We have always joked since then that we had Oprah Winfrey at our wedding. The old preacher was half blind. He could barely read the marriage license. And for some reason, he kept mispronouncing Jennifer as Jeffrey. Tim and Jeffrey. Now my wife has always had a bad habit of the giggles. The later in the night that it goes, the worse it gets. If my wife gets tickled about something, she can't stop laughing. And the more she tries, the more she laughs at the ridiculous situation. And what a time to get the giggles. And my wife got tickled and pretty much laughed her way through our wedding ceremony. Nevertheless, we left married and hungry. and hungry. So we stopped at a Cracker Barrel to celebrate on our way out of town. I'll never forget the waitress recognized that we were newlyweds by my suit and her white dress, and she comped us a dessert. It was either out of congratulations or sympathy. I am not sure which. We spent our first night at a hotel in Charleston, West Virginia. But because we were so poor, we stayed at her cousin's apartment for the rest of our 3-day honeymoon. And fortunately, the cousin was away on a family trip. It was the week of July the 4th. So we found free entertainment with a fireworks display on the Charleston Riverwalk and the Arts and Craft Festival. I say this, and I think if I had to do it again, I would still do this part exactly the same. That was on a Wednesday. Most couples get married on a weekend. We got married on a Wednesday. I don't know why, but it was a Wednesday. It never occurred to us that we should begin our marriage by skipping church. So that Wednesday night, we went to church at Tays Valley Baptist Church in Hurricane, West Virginia, and then we went to the hotel. I don't think I would change that. I just think the Lord honors that. If I live to be 100 years old, I will never forget that day and that week. Because I married my best friend, and I would do it over 100 times again. Just this past week, my wife was rearranging some drawers. She had several boxes of old photos out that she's looking at. And she found a picture that was taken in front of my in-laws' fireplace on that day. Me in my black suit, her in her white dress, just before we left. It is the only picture that we have of our wedding. The thing that amazed me the most about that picture, her hair was big. Big hair, and I was so skinny. So skinny. How things have changed. In this section of Song of Solomon, the Shulamite is reminiscing on her wedding to Solomon. I view it like this. In verse 2 through 8, you have a reflection on courtship. Verse 9 through 14, there is the wedding banquet. The verses that I've read, I believe we would call it the honeymoon night. And then verse 8 through 15 of chapter 2 would be reflections on courtship. And I believe that when we come to this section, the wedding procession has already taken place. The banquet where friends would come and congratulate the couple, that's all ended. Solomon and the Shulamite have retired to his bedchambers for their first night together. And there is a dialogue here, and she does most of the talking. She first talks to him, then she talks about him. If you'll notice in verse number 16, she says, "Behold, thou art fair, my beloved, yea, pleasant." She's speaking to him. In verse number 4, chapter 2, verse 4, she says, "He brought me to the banqueting house. His banner over me was love." Now, the language is erotic, but it's not vulgar. And I said last week that the Bible uses frank language, but it's never offensive, never tasteless language. There are several subjects that I think that are absolutely inappropriate material for jokes. One of them is sex. I detest crude language, dirty jokes, sexual innuendos, locker room talk. I despise that. And with so much vulgarity around us, it's refreshing to hear God's perspective on the subject of marital love, and it's in honest, but it's in wholesome language. So from the Shulamite's reflection on her honeymoon night and Solomon's responses to her, there are several lessons that we can draw out of this passage on how that we can express our love to each other. And I'm titling this morning, that the honeymoon doesn't have to end. The honeymoon doesn't have to end. There are three parts to this. I'll address it like this. First of all, I want you to see reciprocal admiration. Reciprocal admiration. Look at verse number 15. "Behold, thou art fair, my love. Behold, thou art fair. Thou hast dove's eyes." This is Solomon speaking. You remember last week that the Shulamite had expressed some dissatisfaction with her dark skin. I am black but comely. She may have been apprehensive as to what is Solomon going to think when we get into the bedroom together. I wonder if he will think that I am beautiful. So twice Solomon compliments her on her beauty. Thou art fair, my love. Behold, thou art fair. He specifically mentions her eyes. Now, commentators differ on why he compared her eyes to dove eyes, but they all agree on one thing. They don't know why. That's what they agree on. It's in language that they understand, and it means something to her. He says, thou art fair, my love, behold, thou art fair. He is assuring her, he is comforting her, he is putting her at ease in that setting. I don't know who was more nervous on our wedding night, my wife or myself. I realize now, I hope I did back then too, I realize that the most pressure was on her. It was on her. And I hope that I did everything that I could to make her feel comfortable. I read a letter that a newlywed bride wrote about their first night, and here's how she describes a very rude husband. She says, like most new brides, I've been looking forward to this night. For the first time in my life, I was going to be with a man. It was going to be a wonderful thing. Richard was going to love me, and maybe that would take this uneasiness out of my heart. Maybe by pouring out his love, he could take the fear and confusion away from both of us. Maybe we could love it away. My fantasies were interrupted abruptly when Richard looked up from the bed and said, you know, you look fatter with your clothes off. I was devastated. I was self-conscious about my weight anyway. Now I wanted to hide, to cover myself both physically and emotionally from this man. I did not feel like an adored bride. I felt fat and unattractive. And I realized with a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach that while we might be physically intimate, there would be no intimacy between us. And Richard seemed blissfully unaware of the effect his words had on me. There's another letter that I wrote. A different husband loved his wife deeply, saw her as beautiful. Here's how she describes her first night. She says, one day on our honeymoon, I had just stepped from the shower, was looking into the mirror, began criticizing my body. Bill was sitting on the bed. As I would comment on an area I thought needed improving, he would counter with how beautiful I was. This went on for a few minutes until he could stand it no longer. He stood up, wrapped his arms around me, told me to look straight into his eyes. I complied, intrigued by the mystery of what my new husband was up to. He very seriously and lovingly said, I will be your mirror. My eyes will reflect your beauty. You are beautiful. You are perfect. And if you ever doubt it, come stand before me, and the mirror of my eyes will tell you the true story. What a contrast. So Solomon, with very sincere words, puts to rest any concerns, any fears that the Shulamite has about her physical appearance. And the application, gentlemen, is that a wise man will know that he cannot make too much of his wife's beauty. You cannot tell her too many times sincerely that she still takes your breath away. Well, look if you would in verse number 16. Behold, thou art fair, my beloved, yea, pleasant. This is the Shulamite. She is now responding to Solomon's words. She says that he is attractive, thou art fair, same word, and he is charming, pleasant. She's physically attracted to him, but more importantly, she is attracted to how he treats her. There's a book in my library. I recommend it for every young couple. I think it's a good book. I don't agree with everything on it. Gary Chapman wrote a book called The 5 Love Languages. And he lays out the different ways that people express love to one another. He says that every person has a primary love language. Everybody has a secondary love language. and you tend to express love in the way that you want to receive it. It's not important that you know your love language. It's important that you know your spouse's love language. There's 5 ways. One of them are words of affirmation. Using words to affirm people's value to you, such as, I love you, you're precious, things of that nature. The second way to show love is by quality time. Some people feel more love when you sacrifice time, go out on a date, or you give them your undivided attention, quality time. A third way to express love is by receiving gifts. Now, it doesn't have to be expensive. And it doesn't mean that the other person is materialistic, but they find great worth in the thoughtfulness that it takes to buy someone a gift. That's not a gift card, but a gift. Buying someone a gift. The fourth is acts of service. Actions speak louder than words. People who speak that language, they want their spouse to recognize that their life is rough, and they help them in any way possible. Wash the dishes, whatever it might be. They find worth in that. The fifth love language is physical touch. That's not just sexual touch, but a pat, an arm around the shoulder, an affectionate kiss, holding hands, any kind of reaffirming physical contact. Now I know which one is mine. I know which is my primary gift. It is giving gifts. That's how I express love. My wife really appreciates that because she likes to receive gifts, so it really works good for us. And it doesn't matter this morning if you prescribe to this or if you just think that's all whatever. But it is important that you know how to make your spouse feel loved. What's important to them? What makes them feel appreciated? For Solomon and the Shulamite, their love is through complimentary words. How do you show your spouse that they are loved? There is reciprocal admiration. The second part, in verse number 16 and 17, there is a romantic atmosphere. Look if you would in verse number 16. She says, Behold, thou art fair, my beloved, yea, pleasant. Now watch this. Also, our bed is green. The beams of our house are cedar, and our rafters of fir. What a strange thing to say. Now, I believe that the reference to the bed, our bed is green, is that the couple has retired to the bed chambers, the bridal suite. Here's what I envision. I envision the Shulamite lying on the bed, staring up at the ceiling and the decor of the room, and for some reason she comments on the beauty of the beams of cedar and the rafters of fir. I'm going to be honest with you. In our house, I'd have no say in the decor. Because if it was up to me, there would be no decor. I would paint every wall white. Every wall. Why 2 different colors? And for heaven's sake, why 2 different colors in the same room? I would never hang a picture. I would never buy a decoration. I have nothing to say with the decor. But that is something that a woman appreciates. She's lying there and she comments on the bed is green, the beams of our house are cedar, and our rafters of fir. This is something that Solomon would have prepared for them. So she's commenting on how he has set this particular place up. Now, I'm not going to read something into every detail. We're moving through these verses really quickly, all right? But here's what's important, is that cedars and firs were not native to Jerusalem. They had to be imported from either northern Israel or Lebanon. If you want to write down a reference, 1 Kings chapter 5, verse 6 and verse number 9, Solomon is building the temple. There are cedar rafters and beams and pillars, and that has to be bought from Hiram, the king of Tyre. That's in Lebanon. So they have to bring this material down for the building of the temple. Now the same material is in the bridal chamber. It comes at a great cost, indicating that Solomon has spared no expense in this bridal chamber. But there's something else here. We believe the Shulamite was from the north country, from northern Israel. If that is so, she would be familiar with cedars and firs because that's the area that she came from. So this would remind her of home. And I believe that's why she specifically mentions it. She's touched by the fact that Solomon has put enough thought and effort into making this place comfortable for her that the little touches like cedar from her part of the country makes her feel loved. Little touches. Now, I mentioned this and I'll move on to the third thing. Newlywed couples excel at small touches. But older couples tend to let those things die away as the years progress. But did you know that even old people appreciate small touches? Stopping at Starbucks on your way home for Kokey-dokey-doke or whatever they sell at Starbucks. It's been a long time since I bought anything at Starbucks. Drawing a hot bath, a foot massage, some other expression of love. So the question for you is, what have you done for your spouse lately that just said, I was thinking of you? No special occasion, you are the special occasion. Do you take her for granted, or is she still the love of your life? Do you like to make her smile? Or do you care if she never smiles again? It's a romantic atmosphere. It's very convicting in here, very convicting. There's reciprocal admiration. There is romantic atmosphere. When we come to chapter 2, there is real affection. Now watch this. Look at verse number 1. I am the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys. It is the Shulamite that is speaking. Now, the scene hasn't changed. Shulamite's still there. She speaks these words. I am the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys. Now, you recognize that verse, you recognize that phrase because for years, that statement has been memorialized in songs and sermons about Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, the rose of Sharon, Jesus Christ, the lily of the valleys. I'm going to bust your bubble. The verse has nothing to do with Jesus. Jesus is not the rose of Sharon and he's not the lily of the valley. The Shulamite is not speaking about Christ, she's speaking about herself. She says, I am the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys. In fact, when she says that, the words are not even complimentary. Here's what she's doing. She's looking at everything that Solomon has prepared for her. She is expressing how unworthy she feels of all of this attention. Sharon was a low coastal plain in northern Israel between Joppa and Caesarea. The rose that she speaks of is not the rose that we know of. It was a common flower that grew in the plains. So the rose of Sharon, the lily of the valley, really are two ways of saying the same thing. It is an expression of beauty, but commonness. The rose of Sharon, it was just a common flower in the plain. The lily, it was just, there was hundreds, there were millions of lilies in the valley. So here's what she's saying. She's not berating herself over physical flaws, but she's saying, I'm just a common girl like so many others. Nothing special. Why would Solomon choose me? Why would he marry me? There were so many more beautiful, so many more sophisticated girls. I'm just one of 1,000 of common flowers that grows in the plains and the valleys. So in verse 2, Solomon answers her. He says, as the lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. He uses her language and he turns it around on her. Now at first it's a little bit perplexing, and I studied this as much as I could because a lily doesn't usually grow among thorns. I looked at botany websites, and there may be a lily that grows among thorns, but I couldn't find one. And I'm sure if there is one, you will come and tell me about it as soon as this is over, and that is fine. So here's what all I can say. It would be a very unique thing to say a lily among thorns. And I think that's exactly what he is telling her. You're not a common lily in the field. No, you're special. You are unique. All the other women in Jerusalem are like thorns compared to you. You are the lone, beautiful flower that I see. If you insist that you are nothing but a common flower, then I insist that all the other women are thorns by comparison. A lily, by the way, is very delicate, very fragrant, but a very delicate flower. Thorns represent adversity. It represents hardship. It could be that Solomon is reminding her of the hard life that she came out of. The North Country, working in the fields. But out of that thorny, hard life comes a very delicate and a very fragrant life. She's special because the adversities of the past could not diminish the beauty of her inner self. Verse 3, she replies, "As the apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the sons." She is now going to return his compliment, and she refers to him as an apple tree among the trees of the woods, an apple tree in the forest. Now again, this is very important. Apple trees are not native to Palestine. Apple trees had to be imported, and they had to be cultivated. They didn't grow wild in the woods. You planted them in an orchard, or you planted them in a garden, and you cultivated it and you tended to it. If you're walking through the woods in Palestine and all of a sudden you saw an apple tree, that would really get your attention. That's not supposed to be there. That's out of place. Somebody has planted there. That is really unique. That you would marvel at that. And that's what she's saying, is you stand out among all men like an apple tree in the woods. Then in verse 3, she says, "I sat down under his shadow with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste." It is thought that apples were an aphrodisiac in the Near East. They were associated in literature as a symbol of fertility and romance. If that is true, and if she's using apples as a motif for sexual desire, then that becomes a very erotic statement. Given the scene that we're in, I can see that it's not a stretch of imagination to interpret her words in verse number 3 as an expression of physical intimacy. "I sat down under his shadow with great delight. His fruit was sweet to my taste." I believe that is the essence of her words. And I also believe that I handled that statement brilliantly. Verse 4. "He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love." Now again, that verse has been turned into a nice little chorus for children's church. Has nothing to do with the church. A banner is a standard, it's a flag that's been placed over something as a symbol of ownership. It is a public declaration of ownership or association. Some commentators think that Solomon would have brought his wife, would have brought her out to that wedding banquet, kind of like a public presentation, like a couple making their entrance into a wedding reception, and maybe there was a sign over announcing the new car. I'm not sure. But to the Shulamite, the only banner over her was love. He has publicly declared his love for me. It's as if he has flown a banner over my head that simply says, "I love you." Verse 5. "Stay me the flagons, comfort me with apples, for I am sick of love." You know, when two people have an attraction to each other, it is said that they have chemistry. You ever heard that phrase? They have chemistry. That is actually true. There are two chemicals in your brain that are called love hormones. Now, you want to know what dopamine is, right? Dopamine is the high that people feel when they get on drugs or pornography or something like that, the addictive drug, and it gives them that big high, and it makes them want to have that happy sensation again. That's dopamine. There are other two chemicals in your brain. One is called phenethylamine. It is a chemical in the brain that causes the thrill of romantic love. It is the chemical that floods your brain when you are in love, that puppy love, that exhilaration stage. When the Shulamite says that she is sick of love, she's expressing that feeling of exhilaration at being in love. Everybody has experienced that if you've ever been in love. By the way, psychologists say that that chemical spikes at the beginning of a relationship, and it will stay there until about 4 or 5 years until the relationship finally dies down. Which is why psychologists say there's always a spike in divorces after 4 to 5 years of marriage, because the thrill is gone. There is another chemical. It's called oxytocin. Oxytocin is a bonding chemical. It's what causes a mother to feel close to her baby, that bond. And they say what happens there is first the attraction stage, then there is the attachment stage. The attraction stage is exhilarating. The attachment stage is satisfying. And the key to a good marriage is to stay in love past the exhilaration stage till you get to the attachment stage. It is not that you're no longer attracted, but your love goes much deeper than just physical attraction. If you are addicted to the first chemical, then you bounce from relationship to relationship and you're pursuing that thrill of just being in love. There's people that do that. And you never realize the deeply satisfying and the fulfilling relationship of loving somebody for many years. Reality, the attraction phase should be a portal to the attachment phase. And as the relationship moves into the attachment phase, the attraction rekindles over and over again so that you can stay happily married and still feel the exhilaration of being in love to somebody that you've been married to, for me, for 27 years. I feel the attraction and the attachment. I am sick of love. I've got to hurry. His left hand is under my head, his right hand doth embrace me. You can turn that into a sexual statement. I think the simplest way is I want him to put his arms around me and draw me close to him. I feel safe in his arms. I feel loved in his embrace. Quickly, verse 7. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the roes and by the hinds of the field, that ye stir not up nor awake my love till he please. Because the Song of Solomon is not written chronologically, there are some verses that are hard to place. The Shulamite turns to the daughters of Jerusalem. She gives them a warning. I'm sure they're not in the bridal chamber with her. So either she's thinking of something she has told them before, she is imagining a conversation, or the scene has changed. I'm not sure. The warning is the first of three that she's going to give them. It is of allowing love to be awakened before the time. They should learn to flee temptation as swiftly as the deer, the hind and the roe, flee from danger, remain chaste. She had remained chaste before her marriage. She charges them to do the same. Do not let your sexual desires take over your life. Do not awaken those passions until you are married. So she closes with that warning. We're looking at the honeymoon stage of the marriage. And your marriage may have passed that stage many years ago. But you should still be just as deeply in love, even more so than when you were first married. You may not feel the exhilaration of puppy love. You may not feel the exhilaration of the attraction phase, but you should feel the satisfaction and the gratitude of the attachment phase. Do you make your spouse feel loved? Do you do any of the things that says I love you, whether you have been married for 50 days or for 50 years? Your marriage is worth cultivating. Don't let your love grow cold. The honeymoon doesn't have to end. Next Sunday we'll pick it up in verse number 8. Let's stand together this morning, shall we? Heavenly Father, thank you for the Word of God this morning. I pray that you take this application and apply it to our hearts and to our marriages. Young people this morning, Lord, that are not married, that are in the next few years be entering into that phase of life. Oh, I pray that they do not get their marriage counsel from the world, for the world has failed. But I pray that they get their marriage counsel from the Word of God. Bless the 11 o'clock hour, I pray in Jesus' name.